Let me begin by stating that I, myself, have suffered from anxiety for the entirety of my life. It was not until my 40s that I finally got a hold of it and began to overcome it. I studied depression and anxiety for over a decade, having not only professional training on the subject, but I also went on to study it outside of my professional life. I did this because I was not going to sit there and allow anxiety to rule my world. I decided in my mind that the best way to overcome my disease was to completely educate myself on the subject. I needed to deeply dive into what it was and how I can treat it, and ultimately, how I can overcome it. Thankfully, I now live almost completely anxiety-free. What this means to me is that, of course, like anyone who suffers from anxiety, I too have some difficult moments. But through education and treatment, I am now able to control it and live with more purpose and meaning in my life. The following modules are essentially a delivering of my education and experience to you all. So hopefully you can gain a better insight into the subject, and if you too suffer from anxiety, you can potentially start your own journey towards overcoming it. It is important to note that though I've had professional training on the subject, I am not a doctor, and all opinions expressed here are my own and not that of a trained physician. Largely, all of the information herein can be found through research and education. However, I have decided to centralize it here for your benefit. It is vitally important that you understand that you should always confer with a trained medical physician when treating anxiety, depression, or any other mental health disorder. By continuing to watch the subsequent modules, you understand, recognize, and agree that the information herein is information based on my own personal research and experience, not information conveyed by a trained medical physician. Okay guys, let's jump right into Module 1. What exactly is anxiety? So, what is my personal experience with anxiety and what makes me qualified to even deliver this information to you? Well, one, I have had professional training with depression and anxiety for over a decade. Many of you who have found yourself in my learning program have either purchased my book or already read my book, and in that book you'll understand and read that for over a decade I worked in the world of pharmaceuticals and sold what is called an SSRI, also known as a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, also known as an antidepressant. Many antidepressants are indicated for both depression and anxiety. And because I have sold these medications and worked in a professional environment, I have had extensive training on the subject and disease states of depression and anxiety and have had many conversations with primary care physicians, with psychiatry, with all sorts of medical professionals on the subject matter. Secondly, I myself have suffered from generalized anxiety disorder for my entire life. When you read my book, again, you'll know that it was not until my 40s that I was able to actually overcome this dreaded disease state. And truly, that journey was the impetus behind me bringing this education series to you all. And thirdly, I studied anxiety for years outside of my professional life in an attempt to overcome it in my own life. So again, when you read my book and you understand my journey, the idea that for many years I had wasted parts of my life suffering from this dreaded disease state, that is absolutely something that many can overcome. Because I had suffered for so long, I decided to get serious about understanding it and figuring out ways to overcome it. And because of that, I studied it at length outside of my professional life. So let's get into the textbook definition of anxiety. According to the Oxford Languages Dictionary, anxiety can be defined as a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. When you take a look at a clinical disease state within the anxiety framework, like generalized anxiety disorder, Oxford also defines it as a mental condition characterized by excessive or unrealistic anxiety about two or more aspects of life, for example, work or social relationships or financial matters, accompanied by symptoms such as increased muscle tension, impaired concentration, and insomnia. But for those of us that are suffering from anxiety, we know all too well that you get little solace from textbook definitions. As we all know, living with anxiety is far more impactful than words on a page or words in a dictionary. However, I think it's important in an effort to truly understand anxiety and how to overcome it, to define it. And it's a good starting point in understanding the disease of anxiety. So let's continue to understand anxiety and go through some of the symptoms as realized by those of us that are suffering from anxiety, but also from the medical profession. So typical anxiety symptoms include, as was mentioned in the definition, feelings of nervousness, restlessness, or tension, having a pervasive sense of imminent danger, panic, or impending doom, noticing an accelerated heart rate or palpitations. For many of us that have suffered from anxiety, we have these highly anxious moments where your heart starts to increase. You almost feel like you are feeling your body in many respects, and you can almost feel your own heartbeat. And it's very off-putting. Rapid breathing, and in some extreme cases, hyperventilation. Experience increased perspiration or sweating. Shaking or trembling sensations. Feeling weak or fatigued. I can tell you quite pointedly that when I suffered at the peak of my anxiety and the peak of the suffering, fatigue was utterly prevalent. My day was filled with a cloudy fatigue because I was not sleeping correctly. Anxiety precluded me from having a good night's sleep, which resulted in the next day constantly feeling difficult and challenged due to the fatigue. So I can tell you that for me, fatigue as a result of lack of sleep was just a tremendous burden. Difficulty concentrating or being preoccupied with worries instead of what's going on in front of you. Now, I can tell you that the difficulty concentrating was a huge symptom for me. And again, I'll go back to sleep. Myself and sleep had a very difficult relationship, and it was constantly on my mind. Am I going to sleep tonight? Am I going to sleep tonight? And typically I didn't sleep, or if I did sleep, it was very fragmented. And that next day, as I mentioned, was truly, truly difficult because of the fatigue. And when your body is fatigued, your mind is fatigued, and you have, again, a cloudiness in your mind. So I remember going to work and going to my business, trying to concentrate, and it just being an unbelievable effort to think clearly and to concentrate because the anxiety and the kind of domino effect of anxiety made it truly difficult to concentrate. Struggling with sleep problems. I could tell you that this was the one predominant symptom for me, having suffered from anxiety. Sleep was an unbelievable challenge, and as the nighttime approached each night for me, it was a war going on in my head because I knew that my body could not rest and my mind could not rest due to the anxiety. And when that mind is not resting appropriately, it is very, very difficult to go to sleep. The racing thoughts typically kept me up at night. Experiencing gastrointestinal issues. Some people have what's called somatic symptoms, where they're feeling aches and pains or they're feeling some type of physical situation. Some people, that manifests in gastrointestinal issues. That was never an issue for me per se. I could tell you that when I was at my most anxious, I didn't eat well because who could even think about eating when you're anxious? But for many, gastrointestinal kind of side effects or issues are definitely associated with anxiety. Finding it challenging to control excessive worry. I could tell you that I would always have these moments of excessively worrying about things that were outside of my control. And it was almost as if my mind was playing a movie, a fictitious movie that could never be real, was never going to be real, but my mind was manifesting some type of worry due to this fake story that I was concocting in my head about what might happen with some type of situation at work or some type of situation in my personal life. Excessive worry is what kept me up at night and was truly a challenging symptom of anxiety. Lastly, feeling compelled to avoid situations or triggers that provoke anxiety. This is part of those that suffer from social anxiety. People that suffer from social anxiety might not go out, or they might not put themselves in certain situations, and you're truly limiting your life due to your anxiety because of this avoidance of situations.